Tippy's talk. Just to remind everybody in residence here that tomorrow night there's a lunch following this back in Lodge A. We have ordered from Bagel Boss for all of our students, and so give Gil and his family the opportunity to schmooze along with everybody. I would like to note a special guest in our audience. We have a Dr. Maria Scally. Just raise your hand. Maria had the privilege of being in the first entering class in our program in 1990. So let's just give her a hand. They are still living, and they are still working as psychologists. So maybe she'll stay for lunch too, and you can pick her brain a little bit. But she doesn't know anybody because the four original folks just, they were dwindling. And when she was in the program, there were just 4 faculty members. So it was Bob, myself, Marshall, and Dave. So it goes back a long way. So welcome, and thank you for coming. I'd like to introduce Dr. Gil Tippy. He's here today with his family, and that's exciting too. His wife, his son, and his daughter. He is the director and founder of the Rebecca School, which is in Manhattan. It's a therapeutic day school for children ages 4 to 21 with all sorts of neurodevelopmental disorders of varying degrees. He uses the developmental individual, the DRI model, which has as its core belief that relationships are the foundation of learning. And he's been involved with the school since, I don't know, when did you start there, Gil?
7 years ago is when we opened.
7 years ago. He received his doctorate as part of the entering class of 1993, so I guess he might have overlapped a year or two with you, Maria, so yes. They can schmooze about that. And he's either been a teacher or a psychologist for the past number of years. He was directly supervised by Stanley Greenspan, who created the DRI model. He's a well-known author. He's got a blog. His most recent book is called Respecting Autism, the Rebecca School DRI Casebook for Parents and Professionals. He's been a friend to our program forever, and he was often asked to come back and be the master of ceremonies at the end of the year party, or to do interviews with incoming students, or to do open houses. And one of the favorite things that we say about Gil is that he always wore pink socks. And so we never really clarified why that was, but it became sort of an inside joke amongst all the faculty and the students about the guy with the pink socks. So he is a proponent of our program, and what's really fun is he's been nominated to receive the Distinguished Alumni Award, which we give to an alum once a year, and this is the 3rd year that we'll be giving it. When I told the dean who our nominee was for this year, she was so excited because actually Gil was an English major when he was here at Post many years ago, and he was her student. So she was very excited to write the letter saying he'd gotten the award because she remembers him when he was really young. So anyway, Gil.
The ranks of the semi-young, I have finally succeeded. I've entered the ranks of the semi-young. Yeah, the dean was actually a very good friend, and so she was not the dean at the time. Now that she's the dean, it's really a lovely thing. Well, I was the master of ceremonies at the end of the year parties for a couple of years, and I've noticed that I've stopped being invited to do that. So at the end of this talk, you might have a notion as to why they've stopped asking me to do that. I am not, I think about my previous relationship with the doctoral program, in which I believed absolutely perfectly, have nothing but devotion for Long Island University CW Post and its doctoral program and these people who started this program. Because I don't think I would have accomplished many of the things that I've accomplished. I'm certain I wouldn't have had to come out of other places. I might not have gotten into other places. In fact, I think it's somewhat legendary that when my application landed on the secretary's desk way back when, she actually shouted out, "It's a man!" I don't think that was actually happening that much at the time. And also, the program wasn't certified at the time, which is another reason why I think I got in. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why that was probably true and why I've come to believe some of the things that I do believe. And So let me just start. This probably, I didn't have to wear glasses when I was a student, to be honest, and I want you to know that's coming. Just in case you're wondering, it's on its way. I could tell you a number of other things that are also on there, but you don't actually want to know that. It's nice to see that people who actually go to the Rebecca School on a semi-regular basis are here too. Hi, Jennifer. Jennifer is actually brilliant at the Rebecca School. She's currently externing and doing amazing things with kids, and it's really lovely to see you here today. So this has been the most beautiful speech writing I have ever been a part of. It's allowed me to sit down and think for the first time in a long time. I've been very busy lately, and that's a tremendous luxury. You should really enjoy these moments when you can actually sit and think. This is one of those time periods in your life, and so I actually had to carve out time to sit and think. And I hope, I really wanted, my intent was to write this incredibly powerful, wonderful, inspiring speech, and I'm not sure I've accomplished that, but I hope that you will find it wonderfully useful, and if you do, that's fantastic. I'll really be very happy. However, if you don't, I intend to give you 4 useful links to things that you could go watch. So if you find that this wasn't so inspiring, those links might make up for the hour and a half that you might have lost today listening to me speak. I'm going to start with one. This is a bonus one. There's a bonus link. If you haven't watched Bruce Springsteen's keynote address at South by Southwest this year, he gave the keynote address at South by Southwest, which is a big music conference in Austin. It's one of the greatest speeches I've ever seen anybody give, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be inspiring at the very beginning, but it's about aging, and it's about the history of rock and roll, and it's about how young songwriters can, how the world has changed for young songwriters. It's a brilliant, beautiful speech, 57 minutes, it's on YouTube, totally free. So there, I just gave you back an hour that you'll enjoy. So I get it now. So I found out, welcome. Come on. There are seats up front. Good seats always available. I did this to someone at the opening day of the Rebecca School 2 years ago. They came in late, and I said, oh, come on and sit down. And she was a new employee, and she actually resigned like 4 days later. So I've been thinking about who it is that I admire and how it is that I got here. And it turns out, on reflection, that I've met or known or been acquainted with, either personally or through their work, a number of really amazing geniuses who I'd like to just mention. I happen to know James Watson personally, because he lives in Oyster Bay, and he's the guy who theorized about the double helix structure of DNA. And I want you to know that he's actually a genius. The guy is really a bright guy. I played basketball with him. He's not a good basketball player. Gary Snyder, the Beat Poet, is a hero of mine. I don't know if you know who Gary is, but he's an eco hero. He's right at the front of ecology, warriorism. He's a Buddhist, and he is also a genius and a great poet. He is the hero of Dharma Bums, which is a Jack Kerouac novel. Gary Snyder is the hero. They call him Jaffe Ryder. I know Annie Bergman. I don't know if you know who Annie Bergman is. Annie she's 94. She was... I brought her here a few years ago. Oh, you did? Annie's actually a friend now because of the Rebecca School, and she was one of the people who, with Margaret Mahler, started the Manhattan Children's Center. So when you talk about separation, individuation, all of those wonderful things, Annie Bergman is one of the people there. It turns out that Margaret Mahler hated kids with developmental disabilities, not because she personally hated them, but because they just weren't good research subjects. So she would shunt them all off to Annie Bergman. And Annie Bergman worked with kids with autism in music before people actually thought that that was a viable way to work. And for years and years and years has teach and continued to work. She came to Rebecca and she took my hand and she said to me, Gil, do they know? She was talking about, we have 120 staff members. So she said, and they're all younger than you guys. And she said, do they know? Do they know? I said, what do you mean, Annie? And she said, I don't think I called her Annie. That's a lie. I think I called her Dr. Bergman. She said, do they know that this was Margaret Mahler's dream? Do they know that this kind of a school where kids could actually be themselves was Margaret Mahler's dream, and she would have done it had she lived long enough. So she's a genius. And I know Stanley Greenspan, Stanley passed, but he was a good and close friend, and he was a genius. Really talented, dogmatic, hardworking, invented the DIR model. My brother, who raised me, is a genius. He's one of the brightest men I've ever met, and really talented and funny as anything. He's a genius. I got a chance to meet the Dalai Lama as part of this mindfulness in schools thing. And I'll tell you that he is really, he's a genius. He's, and he's a Dalai Lama. He's got that going for him. That's a Caddyshack reference. But he's just a simple Buddhist monk. He's not anything special, he's just a monk. But he is a genius. And those guys that I've met and known and really been attracted to, I think they're wonderful. But they're not the people who I idolize. The people who I idolize are in an entirely different class. So let me tell you some of the people who I idolize. These are the people who, I'm into paper conservation, my goal. There's another group of people who I would describe as holy fools. You know the concept of the holy fool? There are Sufi holy fools, and these are very wise people who then act kind of strange and goofy. Those are the people who I actually admire, and I think I probably base more of my work on. This is why I'm no longer invited back to the doctoral program to try to bring in new students, right? But these are the connected, animated, joyful, dancing, laughing people. You should not take a sense of humor. You should not make the mistake of assuming that a sense of humor assumes lack of seriousness, right? These are the people who are directly connected, and it occurs to me that these are the people who actually make a difference in the world. So here we go. My first guy is Richard Feynman, and you may not know who Richard Feynman is. Richard Feynman is probably our greatest homegrown physicist, possibly the greatest physicist who has lived. Freeman Dyson once said, a genius is somebody who you would think, if I could be 100 times better at what I do, I'd be like him. But a wizard is Richard Feynman. And Feynman actually was one of the guys who worked on the atom bomb. He invented Feynman diagrams. He invented most of quantum physics at the beginning. And he also was the guy who figured out why the Discovery shuttle blew up. And the way he did it was, while everybody else was talking at a Senate congressional hearing, he asked for a glass of ice water, and he dipped the O-rings in the ice water, and he went like this and broke them. And he was the guy who actually just sat there and figured it out. He's a genius, and so here's one of the valuable links I'm going to give you that you're going to say, here, I didn't waste my time today. That link at the bottom, which I will share with you if you just email me at my blog, is the link to Bill Gates has bought all of his lectures and put them for free online. So the 1963 Feynman lectures from Cornell University are all available to you. He's a hilarious Brooklyn guy who happens to be the greatest teacher, and he's teaching undergrads in this course. So if you want to understand quantum physics in the easiest possible way, which by the way has a direct relationship to what we're doing, which I won't bother to explain to you today, go to Bill Gates' page. This is Ken Ralston. Now, I'm looking to see if anybody actually knows who Ken Ralston is, because if you know who Ken Ralston is, you spend way too much time gaming. Does anybody play the role-playing video games online? This is the guy who wrote and created some of the biggest selling video games of all time. And his name is Ken Ralston, and he happens to have been a friend of mine since I was 13 years old. And Ken wrote the Amalur, and God, I don't even remember which version of this is, but he's a famous guy. He is hilarious and funny and serious and joyful, and he lights up a room like nobody else, and he is directly connected. So when you're in his spotlight, you're the guy. And he's one of the great holy fools I have ever met in my entire life. That link is to his Wikipedia page. Gary Snyder and Allen Ginsberg. Gary was one of the guys I mentioned as a genius. He's the guy on this side. But Allen Ginsberg is one of the holy fools. Did anybody ever have an opportunity to meet Allen Ginsberg? Little schlubby guy, one of the great beat poets, and a peaceful, loving, hilarious gay activist, anti-war, hippie genius who walked into if you read the great book that was written about the Hells Angels, he walks directly into the center of the Hells Angels to convince them that it's a bad idea to beat up peace activists, because he just knows that by his good intent that they won't do it, and they actually liked him. He walked into an even tougher crowd a few years ago that I was a part of. He walked into an undergraduate class at Hofstra University, and they were told they had to be there, much like some of you were told you had to be here. And I thought, oh my God, he pulled out his little harmonium and started pumping it, and I thought, they're going to kill him, they're going to kill him, they're going to kill him. And within about 30 seconds, a group of Hofstra undergraduates were actually up and dancing and laughing, and he had them all singing, and they were dancing, and they were singing political songs about Jesse Helms being evil, and it was and that was the beauty of this wonderful, crazy man. So the link I provided you is, I would suggest anywhere on YouTube you could see his brilliance, but the link I provided you here is him reading the brilliant poem In My Kitchen in New York. And it's a video of him doing Tai Chi, and the poem is about what's actually going on in his head while he's doing Tai Chi. It's wonderful. So, I want to see who else I've got here. This is Clive Robbins. Clive Robbins invented the Nordhoff-Robbins music therapy model. Clive died 6 months ago. He decided there was a way to help kids on the autism spectrum with music, and he quit his job as a Waldorf teacher and took off and just started traveling with another guy and saying, hey, give us your worst kid in your school. Give us your worst kid in your school, and we'll work with them. And they sat down and they taped it all, and they invented a way of working with kids with autism in music therapy that I'm going to show you in a few minutes. Clive was hilarious and generous and kind and funny and absolutely dogmatic and right about what he said, but connected, deeply connected. And that's what matters. But I have to tell you, probably my greatest hero, and I'm not joking about this, and the person who I think I would most want to model my life on as an adult from here on in. So I'm 55, I'll be 56 in a couple weeks. I want to be, for the rest of my life, if I could model my life on anybody, it's a gentleman by the name of Wavy Gravy. Do you know who Wavy Gravy is? Do you know who Wavy Gravy is? Wavy Gravy was the beat poet Hugh Romney, and he moved to California and started something called the Hog Farm Collective. And then they came back here to the East during the Woodstock Festival, and they ran the food and all of the medical tents, and they were the police force, although they called themselves the Please Force, at Woodstock. And he's the guy who got up on the stage at Woodstock and said, what we have in mind here is breakfast in bed for 500,000 people. So if you go see the Woodstock movie, that's Wavy Gravy. So it's been 40-something years since Woodstock. What has Wavy Gravy been doing? So it's almost too numerous to mention. I cannot tell you what this holy fool has been doing since then, but I will try to hit some of the highlights. He ran nobody for president in 1976 on the theory that nobody was better than the other candidates and nobody was going to inspire the public to vote. So he ran nobody for president, and he taught improv to neurologically disabled kids in Pasadena. He's been at every meaningful protest for the last 45 years for all of you guys. Every meaningful protest. He's had 3 back surgeries. They have to carry him on a stretcher into the middle of the protest. He said the reason why he wears clown makeup is because he realized the cops didn't like to hit clowns. And he'd been hit too often, so he decided to start wearing clown makeup. He started Camp Win a Rainbow for kids, inner city kids who actually have problems and who were fighting and in gangs. And it's free, it's no charge to kids. And he uses his Ben and Jerry royalties, That's who Wavy Gravy is. He's the guy who inspired the ice cream, the Ben & Jerry's ice cream, right? He uses his Ben & Jerry royalties to provide scholarships to homeless Bay Area kids and to Native American kids in South Dakota. He also, finally, just as a sidelight, he raises money for clinics that he created in India, Nepal, and Tibet, and they do 80,000 eye surgeries a year because Wavy Gravy and all of his buddies in the Grateful Dead and all those folks raise money. And 1.8 million people on the planet can see today because of operations funded by Wavy Gravy. So the link I provided you is to just a really beautiful movie which actually will sum up my entire talk if you bother to watch it. It's a documentary called Saint Misbehavin'. It's the Wavy Gravy movie, and it will give you an idea of who this guy is and why I want to be like him. So why in a psychology program doctoral talk do I want to talk about all of these people? Well, I'm going to sum it up with one of Wavy Gravy's favorite statements. He has a lot of funny things that he says, but Wavy Gravy says, whenever he can, we're all the same person trying to shake hands with ourselves. And that's basically my theory about what it is, what's necessary in the world of psychology. The single most important thing is to be deeply connected to yourself and then to be connected to whoever it is you're in the room with. And I don't care if that's a neurotypical adult, and I don't care if it's a kid on the Autism Spectrum who has a disorder of relating and communicating, and supposedly is not going to be able to actually connect with you. To be deeply connected with is actually what's therapeutic, in my humble opinion. So how did I get here? How did I get to CW Post? I failed out of high school. I would like to accept your applause. If it had been an act of my rebellion, I would say all for it. But basically, there was nothing in high school that meant anything to me at all. I thought I was fairly smart, and I liked being at school, but I just didn't want to do any of the things. So I failed out of high school, basically, except for the generous act of a couple of people. But I've noticed that I did get 3 varsity letters, so I did pay attention to physical things. And I was in the chorus for 4 years. I was the only kid in my high school who was in the chorus all 4 years. And I did actually star in the high school musical my senior year, which was Bye Bye Birdie. And I was Albert Peters. And I can sing the entire thing to you if you would like me to. I'd be glad to do it now, or later on you can contact me and we'll do it later. So there were things that were actually important in my high school education, but they weren't any of the things going on in the classroom. There were none of the fact-based things. The fact-based things were absolutely meaningless to me. I couldn't really read at all, and I could not write. Couldn't write a word. I could read, okay, but I could not write, and so I really struggled. And then George Wilson came along. George Wilson is my high school basketball coach and my high school gym teacher, and he is the Jedi Knight of my childhood. That's him at my 50th birthday party. He was so tickled to be invited. He wanted to know what he should wear, and he was really excited. And he was deeply connected to me. He was the one deeply connected sweetheart man who actually paid attention to the sort of misfitty kid who, I have to tell you, the math teachers despised me. I don't exactly understand why, but I wouldn't do homework, so they hated me. But Mr. Wilson really knew who I was, and so I'd be on my way out the door, about to do something really bad. I was taken off, and the phone would ring, and I'd go pick up the phone, and it would be Mr. Wilson on the phone. It'd be Sunday afternoon, or it'd be Saturday night, and he'd say, Tip, I'm gonna open up the gym, and I'm inviting some kids down. You want to shoot around? This is back when you were allowed to open the gym, and there were insurance regulations and stuff. Hey, welcome. It's so nice to see you. Back when you could open a gym and that was legal, and he just, he knew when I was about to fall off the track. And it was his deep devotion and his connection that kept me from actually falling into things that would have been even worse. And because of him, I did graduate from high school eventually. Proudly 114th out of 144 in a small high school, but somehow I got through. And entirely because of just the connection with this man who understood me. That's pertinent to what I want to talk about in the DIR model, because if you don't understand that, then you don't understand how to work with kids with autism. How did I get here? I graduated from high school. Barely. I went to Leicester Junior College. It's the only junior college in the country that would take me. Woohoo! They went out of business the next year, so I guess they needed people. I walked onto a basketball team, though. I was lucky enough. I walked onto their basketball team, and I got to play with a bunch of guys who've been thrown out of major universities. So I played really high-level basketball. Then, well, may not seem pertinent to you, but then I got into Cornell University because of it. And I interviewed with the basketball coach. So let's not make any pretenses of my academic abilities. And then I taught a lot of school. I taught school for 13 years in schools, public and private, here on the North Shore, Long Island, and in other places. And I started connecting only with kids who weren't making it in the program. Like, I thought I was a really great English teacher. I thought I knew a lot of stuff, but it wasn't helping kids. And so I started connecting with those kids who just weren't making it. And I realized I got to do something else. And so I went back and got my master's from Teachers College, Columbia University, and somebody astutely pointed out to me that that was not the most valuable degree I could have possibly earned. My master's degree in developmental psychology really wasn't going to actually do too much for me. I pointed out to them that I had graduated with a bachelor's in medieval literature from Cornell. If they wanted to talk about useless degrees, that would be I was specializing in them at the time, apparently. But then I applied. I was lucky enough to come here, and I was smart enough to come to this clinical psychology doctoral program. I sat through the Alumni interview and basically laughed. I interviewed at St. John's, and I stood up in the middle of the interview and I said, thank you, you know what, I don't think I'm going to finish the interview. And that's all true. But I came here and I was really touched and really moved. And the fact that you were only 7 minutes from my house had nothing to do with it. But the truth was because I was touched by the people that I met, really deeply touched. And the first place I went to where people seemed as if they cared to know who I was, actually know who I was. And so I made the decision to come here. If they would only accept me, and they did. You know, they were certified at the time, or accredited at the time. So there were probably a lot of people. So in one class, I heard that the role of psychologists in society was to be an agent of the society, to help kids, to help people fit into the society. And I thought to myself, wow, I so don't want to do that. I have no interest in doing that whatsoever. That's not what I like. I'm not someone who, I certainly didn't feel that way about myself. What I really wanted to be was somebody who could represent the individual in his relation with the society. And so I tried to figure out, well, so where in this crazy psychology world do I fit? So in Dave's class one day, he showed a film of Ivar Lovaas. And you know who Ivar is? Ivar is the guy who decided you could work with kids with autism. Up until then, there was like, you know, there were people doing work, but it wasn't well known. And Ivar said, well, let's work with them behaviorally. And he was this lovely, sweet, gentle man. He unfortunately, you know, has passed now. But he was a very sweet man, and I watched him working with this little girl. Oh, you lovely little darling, but you crying. Oh, my little darling. And he pushed her on the shoulders, and she sat down, and he gave her a sip of juice. And I thought, wow. Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. All this other stuff seems sort of theoretical to me, but that seems sort of real. And so I said to myself, I'm interested in autism now, and maybe I could do something. And then I got to visit the Martin Morrell School, which is a school that was started by Howard Schneider, as a friend of Dave's. And I wasn't too inspired by that, to be honest with you, because it's actually, I mean, behaviorism is tough for me to watch, so I'm not such a fan. But I thought, well, if he can start a school, then I can start a school. I did find out one thing, though, that you shouldn't start a not-for-profit. If you start a not-for-profit, you have a board. On the board are parents. Eventually, you're going to cross the parents. Eventually, they're going to fire you. So when we started the Rebecca School, it is not a not-for-profit. There's no board who can fire me. I'm essentially a free agent. So long as I keep doing what my money boss says, I'm good. So the Martin Burrell School, and I thought, I'm going to start a school. That's what I'm going to do. I decided right that day, I'm going to start a school. And I'm sorry that Marshall isn't here, because Marshall actually stood up at a meeting one time and he said, you know, this is Gil Tippy, he's going to speak to you today, and he's going to start a school for autism. He said he's going to start a school for autism, and I believe him. And he had faith in me. And I want to just, he's the only person who ever said to me, you know what, I believe you're going to start a school. And so I started a campaign. And what I did was to start a campaign, and this is instructive for all of you, because you can all do it too.
Yeah.
Of course, if you hit the microphone while you're giving presentations, you look like a class, so you should not do that. So I shook hands with everybody I could at every conference I went to. So I went to every single conference. You know, your professor is saying, go to the conferences, go to this conference, go to that conference. You don't think it matters one iota, you think it's a waste of money. It's not a waste of money. You go and you shake everybody's hand you can. I've loved your work, thank you so much, it was a lovely presentation, thanks so much. People, when I do presentations, now line up to introduce themselves to me, not because I can do something for them today, but you know, 5 years from now they're going to send me an email and they're going to say, I saw you presented so-and-so, ba, 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 ba. So I shook everybody's hand at every conference that I could. When I needed a job, I shook their hands and said I need a job. It got so bad at one point that Effie Kamisis, who was a brilliant behaviorist at Queens College and who had been a professor of mine, I went up to her and I said, Effie, I need a job. And she literally did this. That's known as planned ignoring. And she was a real behaviorist. But I shook everybody's hand, I annoyed the hell out of them. And I volunteered for every single committee that I could volunteer for. So if somebody said, you know, there's a committee to write this grant, I would volunteer for it. If somebody, I was in the North Shore LIJ Health System for a while, I volunteered for their Autism Steering Committee. It was a stupid committee, but I volunteered, I went once a month, just so I could meet everybody and shake their hand, they could know who I was. When they needed someone to write the brochure, your next patient has autism, I wrote the brochure. They still give that out, by the way, the North Shore LIJ Health System still gives that brochure out. I volunteered for every committee, I did every scut work that I could, I shook everybody's hand that I could, and I said I'm going to start a school, basically, to every single person that I could. I worked as an applied behavior specialist in a group home, and I did everything I could to meet all the people in that agency. I took a job supervising all the student teachers working toward their masters in special education with an annotation in autism here on the post campus, which meant that I had to pay my own mileage in my own car to go visit people in their student teachings at the schools that we're at, but that got me into every single school in the New York metropolitan area that had an autism program, and all of the public school districts. So I saw every single district, and I shook every single district administrator's hand, and I knew every single person who was working with kids with autism, and I supervised about 60 of them. So when they went to be teachers, they were all students of mine here at Post. So I took an adjunct salary. I don't know if you know what that means. Anybody got an adjunct salary right now? Okay, so you're living high on the hog, and you know, don't spend it all in one place. But I took an adjunct salary just so I could have an opportunity to do that, and so that when it came time to start the Rebecca School, and there was a money guy searching around for somebody to actually start a school for him, my name came at that committee from about 8 different directions. And it wasn't that I was so qualified, because I don't think by any stretch of the imagination I was the most qualified person to start an autism school. But it seemed like I was because everybody said my name to this committee. So they asked me to come in and interview. I said, no, I wasn't really sure I wanted to come in and interview. Then they asked me, would you please come interview? And then I said, okay, I'll come and interview. And I was the only person they interviewed, and I accepted the job. And we started the school 7 years ago. We had a year's ramp-up time. We took over a building in Manhattan, a big old turn-of-the-century cast-iron building, which we gutted and rebuilt entirely. 35,000 square feet, but I'll talk about that a little bit. But I realized that I really am not in a position to tell people what to do. And I didn't want to be part of a program that told kids what to do. No interest in telling kids what to do. I don't want to tell them that you have to do this, then you have to do that, that we have a program laid out for you which we intend for you to follow. Although I certainly think there is need for structure, I don't mean that. I I don't think I'm in a position to tell people what to do, because I don't think I have the right to force compliance on others. After all, my decisions have not always been free of error. I have my wife and my son and my daughter in the back room, and they will be glad to vouch for that. So we decided that the school had to be a school that wasn't a strictly behavioral school, that wasn't following another model. And we went and contacted Stanley Greenspan, and he actually agreed, all right, let's start a school. The model had never been used in schools. It's really it's a clinical model, and we turned it into a school model. I believe that nothing comes from the outside. A good teacher tries to avoid derailing the process of discovery that the student can experience. When the student discovers it for themselves, they own it. That's a quote from John Lurie, who started the Zen Mountain Monastery here in New York. He's wrote the book The Zen of Creativity. It's a beautiful book. And our model says, we're not going to just keep putting things into kids. Like, that's not our job, piling stuff onto kids. Our job is to say, I always tell the staff of the school that our actual curriculum at the school is to invite kids into the world and to say, come on, the world's a really cool place. Come on, be there. It's really cool. Come with me. They already have it inside them, right? The sun is still there even when the clouds are out. And kids have it inside them, even if they have autism. And our job is to pull it out of them. I'm going to show you lots of fun dancing, singing videos that you'll just find incredibly charming. That'll demonstrate that to you in a minute. I'm showing a picture of Stanley Greenspan, even though he didn't make it into the Holy Fools group. But he is a genius, and he is the greatest developmental theorist who you probably don't know anything about. He held all the important positions at NIMH, and he's done lots of wonderful things. But what he was dogmatic about was that affect leads cognition, and that it is our job to find out what interests a kid and bring them with us. This is a book that he asked me to write with him. It was a tremendous honor. It is doing really, really well. It's kind of a shameless plug, but but if you did want to know about the DIR model, this is a case book with 15 cases told from the parent's point of view in their voice, what the school did with their kid, and then what Stanley told us we should be doing better. So it's the parents talking about the kid, us talking about the kid, and then Stanley saying, well, that's pretty good, but let me tell you why it could be better. It's the only place where there's any clinical material by Stanley Greenspan about how to make a program better. And someone pointed out to me, I've been doing a lot of interviews. I was talking with Eva on the way over. There are I have two publicists, and so they are lining up interviews all the time. And so I'm doing these crazy interviews all the time. But someone pointed out to me in an interview the other night, a radio interview, that it's the first time they ever read a program, a clinical program or a school program, criticizing their own work and saying it wasn't as good as it could be, and that here's how it could be better. That they'd never actually read a book where the program said, yeah, we thought we were doing it pretty well, but we weren't, and here's Stanley Greenspan saying you could be doing it better. And it never occurred to me that that was unique, but it does speak to the ethos at the school. You got to have a mighty thin skin at Rebecca School. Thin skin. You have to have a thick skin at Rebecca School because you're presenting clinical cases almost every single day, whether you're in an occupational therapy group with the PTs or with the work group that works with the kid, or once a week on Wednesdays. We have a team present in front of the entire school and in front of the parents of the kid that they're working with. And then I do what Stanley used to do to us, which is to tell them what they're doing wrong and how it could be better. So you have to be pretty tough. They do more clinical presentations than any group of people that I've ever been associated with. And it is the most transdisciplinary team that I've ever been associated with. So let me talk about Rebecca School. Rebecca School opened in '06, September. We were not ready. The day before, they told us we couldn't occupy the upper floors, or they would shut us down forever until after the fire inspection went through. And so we had 44 kids and about 50 staff members all stuck on one floor for day one in a brand new school. We had never used the DIR model, had never been used. And I asked, you know what the St. Crispin's Day speech is from Shakespeare, where Henry IV Fifth is rallying the troops and saying, you're all going to die today, but everybody will wish they were here. Future generations of English people will wish they. I gave them the same Christmas Day speech because I thought we were all going to die. And we almost all did. The first chapter of Respecting Autism is about how the clinical director almost got killed. I mean, the program director almost got killed. So we opened our doors then. We now have 115 kids and we're full and we have a waiting list. We only do DIR, which I will explain to you what DIR is in some quick detail in a minute. And we have 35,000 square feet. This is one of our classrooms. You see the taxi cab going by. Everybody thinks, wow, kids with autism, that's going to be really distracting. They're New York City kids with autism. Cabs. That's 30th Street between Madison and Park. It's right near where Mario Batali has opened up Italy, and it's a pretty cool neighborhood now. But one of our music therapy externs, we did a big presentation on Friday, and she got mugged right out in front of the school. She got her iPhone taken. She chased the guy. A citizen grabbed the guy, threw him to the ground. She got her iPhone back. Then the cops came. Then the news cameras came, and they held up, they said to her, well, now you're going to have to go down and press charges. And she said, wiping away tears, she said, no, I have a presentation. So she came up and presented to the staff after having been mugged out on 30th. And we take these clinical things very seriously. We have 15 classrooms. We have 2 large sensory gyms. It's very important in the school, sensory space. It's what's not available in a lot of different places that you'll see kids treated with autism. We have a large school gym for adapted physical education. We have an art room, a ceramic studio. That's where my son works. It's one of the 2 places my son works. He also works in the gym. My son Glenn is an employee of the Rebecca School, so that must tell you something about whether I think it's a good place to be or not, or that he thinks it's a good place to be, which is probably a better judgment. We have 3 music therapy rooms with certified music therapists. I'm going to show you music therapy, and you're going to be astounded if you've never seen it. We have a large rooftop playground overlooking the Empire State Building, and that's one of the sides of the rooftop playground. We have 120 employees, and those employees include teachers, TAs, psychologists, social workers, music therapists, drama specialists, occupational therapists, speech and language pathologists, floor time specialists. Floor time is the play-based part of DIR, administrators and support staff. We have 2 students to every teacher in the classroom, although if you notice the ratio of staff to kids is about 1 to 1. We have weekly case conferences, which I just told you about, and interns and externs in every single program. You have sent one of your students to us, and we have all the major New York universities in occupational therapy, music therapy, psychology. When the clinical psychology program of CW Post asked would we make a doctoral internship available this year, we said yes, and we did. Of course, no one took it. But somebody from George Washington University actually is coming in, and we will have a clinical psychology doctoral internship next year at the Rebecca School. We found the money for it, and that's the other nice thing about working in this model. If there's something good that should happen, we can make it happen. All right, so I'm going to talk to you about what it's like. This is me fulfilling the promise of the lecture. The promise of the lecture was to tell you what it's like to be a developmentalist in a behavioral world. So the functional emotional assessment scale is what Stanley Greenspan put together for assessment of kids. And that's all the junk about it. But all it is it's a 15-minute play-based test. Take a look at the kid, look at these developmental levels. The ADOS, on the other hand, is a very elaborate test developed by a really smart group of smarty people. It's the gold standard. It's kind of hard to administer. It takes some time. But it's the one test that everybody believes really diagnoses autism. This is a study that was just published with the really elegant name of Use of Machine Learning to Shorten Observation-Based Screening and Diagnosis of Autism. I do not recommend this article to you, except to say that what they did was they crunched the ADOS down to the 8 questions that you need to actually diagnose autism perfectly, accurately, 100% of the time. What are those questions? Oh, by the way, this was published in one of the subsidiaries of Nature Translational prestigious little publication. These are the 8 items. You'll notice that they are all items that focus on communication, social interaction, and play. So if you just thought those 8 items would diagnose autism perfectly 100% of the time, out of the ADOS, out of the very elaborate ADOS. Well, interestingly enough, that's what the Functional Emotional Assessment Scale already tests. So this little simple 15-minute test developed by a developmentalist perfectly matches exactly what all of this fancy stuff, the gold standard test, actually is measuring. Well, that's a problem for the ADOS people, right? So you want an intervention according to the DSM-5 that's going to DSM-4TR that's going to address social interaction, peer relationships. These are the DSM criteria for autistic disorder. Seeking shared enjoyments, social and emotional reciprocity, the ability to initiate or sustain a conversation, also spontaneous make-believe play, also lack of social awareness and dependence on memory to attempt to accomplish goals, which is the inflexibility criteria in the autistic disorder. So in the old DSM-4TR, the developmentalists were right, because these are the core deficits of autism. So what do you do? What do you do if you're a behaviorist and you realize, well, none of my criteria are in the autistic disorder diagnosis? You change the criteria for the autistic disorder. So here's the DSM-5 criteria. Lousy slide, totally useless, but I put it up there to show that I was really paying attention and I wasn't just a flake. Now we have a whole set of criteria for restricted interest and repetitive behaviors that we didn't have before. And we have the severity level criteria, which I don't think is such a problem, except that it's going to allow insurance companies to exclude people from, hey Sarah, it's going to allow people to exclude people from treatment. So now you change the criteria. So who's on the DSM committee? So what's changed, right? Severity indicators, greater emphasis on external behaviors, and no mention anywhere of play. It's not in the criteria anymore. Play is so important that it's been recognized by the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights as the right of every child. It's important to child development. It is, in fact, all that's important to child development. Nothing that you do with a kid in the classroom has any meaning at all except for play. Who's on the DSM committee? The creator of the ADOS, as you might have guessed. Researchers, as they should be. I mean, good university PhDs, they like to do research. And practitioners using what methodology do you think? Of course, they're all behaviorists. And you can find that out by going to the DSM website. It's actually fairly easy. They have their Vitas up there. Why would a researcher want the new criteria? Because the old criteria was hard to research. And research on external behaviors is relatively easy. The story that reminds me of is a drunk is looking for his keys under a street light, on his hands and knees. A cop comes up to him and says, you know, what are you doing? He says, I'm looking for my keys. And the cop says, did you lose them here? He says, no, I lost them over there. And the cop says, why are you looking here? He says, because the light's better here. So, it's easy to do research on external behaviors, but it doesn't tell you anything about what's actually going on. Money was hard to get because Autism Speaks controls all the money in their behavioral group. So if you want to get money from National Institutes of Mental Health, or you want to get money from Autism Speaks, you got to do a behavioral study. And if you change the criteria, you get more money and it's easier to do research. So why do the behaviorists want the new criteria? Because they're old. Under the old criteria, it didn't make any difference if you taught a kid not to flap his hands, he still had autism. The new diagnostic criteria makes an irrelevant intervention suddenly relevant, right? Not by being more relevant, but by changing the definition. And this is what it's like to be a developmentalist in a behavioral role. It just is. So you're constantly fighting and saying to people, but no, human beings matter and the relationship matters. And people say to you, prove it to me and show me the data. And I want to see more data. I had a very famous guy once put a bunch of data on the desk. And he said to me, you know, oh, well, I have the data proving that you're wrong. And I said, well, you know, I really don't want to see your data. He said, you know, I said, I honestly believe, doctor, and I'll leave off his name, that you believe that what you're doing is actually helping kids. And he said, but what, Gil? But what? I'm deluded? And I said, yes, Dr. Simon, I believe you're deluded. And he tried to flip the table. And he called my boss and tried to get me fired. So, let me tell you why I love this. It's true. I would be glad to share his name privately, not on tape some other time. But you would recognize him because you're being taught his model. The DIR model is developmental, just like Piaget, any other developmentalist you like. Happens to be Stanley's developmental. It's an individual difference model, and it's a relationship model. Individual differences is the stuff from the OT literature. If you're not familiar with the OT, occupational therapy literature, you should read the sensory integration stuff, because they've been doing it for 30 years. It's pretty well established. It's research-based. We just happen to pay attention to the fact that some kids have messed up sensory systems, and it's relationship-based. And you know, when I met Annie Bergman, she just solidified for me that this is a disorder of rapprochement. This is a disorder where kids cannot leave and come back. It's very, it's a developmental disorder. That's why it's listed under developmental disorders. These are the developmental things. You know what? I'm going to give you just a sprint through this, and I'm going to give you a slide at the end. If you want to go to my blog, I'll send you all the slides, all the notes you can have. I'll send you references. I'll send you lots of fun stuff in your inbox. Okay? So don't worry about this. Functional, emotional, developmental milestones. We're at 12:30, so I have a half an hour. I'm going to zip so you can see a half an hour video. Okay? Kids have to do one thing, and then they do another thing, and then they do another thing. That's all it says. Not so bad. Individual differences. We pay attention to kids' processing ability. You and I have differences in processing. Why shouldn't kids have differences in processing? That's all we're doing. It's relationship-based, and that means everybody. So we train everybody. And that's me with onion eyes. The patient took that picture of me. So you have to think of who you are in the room, because the truth is, you as a person is what's doing the therapeutic work. You're the instrument. It makes it very hard to have 25-year-olds doing this at a school. And so as a result, we run support groups every week for the staff, because it's such a difficult intervention. They're giving and giving and giving of themselves, because they are the instruments here. Who cares? I mean, really. I could show you all the data in the world, but who cares? We know the kids' minds are wired for relationship, and the guy who told us that was this beautiful man, Dr. T. Barry Brazelton. He reminded us all of that. Barry is also 93 years old. He still lectures. If you can go see him, please do. He's a lovely guy, and he talks about how kids develop in relationship. So I'm going to imitate Barry now. Are you ready? So Barry's delivered thousands of babies, and the bond between mother and child and father and child is so important. So he says, you know, so the babies are born, and I'm holding them in my arm, and I say to the mommy, "Mommy, Mommy, call your baby's name." And the baby turns and looks at the mommy. And then I say to the daddy, "Daddy, Daddy, call your baby's name." And about 70% of the time, the baby turns and looks at the daddy. And the other 30% of the time, I tilt his head. So this is Barry, and this is my daughter Sarah in Dr. Brazelton's arms, and my daughter Sarah is back there. She's aged, but so has Barry. And here he is kissing her, and you know, she was at that stage, if you know anything about child development, where you're not supposed to go to strangers, but he put his arms down, he went like this, and she went up, and she got it there. And you know, to tell you the truth, Barry Brazelton does that. I kind of wanted to get into his arms too. My fantasy is that Barry's going to pick me up and do this. The notion behind the play part of DIR is you're supposed to be charming and entertaining and be the toy. So, and you want to figure out what the kid wants to do, then you want to help him to do it. So if a kid's licking a spot on the floor and rubbing it, I want to get down and actually know why that's interesting to the kid. And I want to join in. Maybe that'll turn that into a relationship. Maybe it won't. Maybe I'll block the spot, and maybe he'll have to push me away. But you know what? What was essentially self-stimulatory and totally solitary then becomes an interaction. You got to deal with me, buddy, because I'm a human being, right? So I'm working in theory of mind, I guess, if you're one of those English persons who believes that. I guess that's Simon Baron Cohen, right? These milestones are important, but I put these two in blue because I wanted to show you something. If you get here, where you can problem solve with another human being in a continuous flow, and jump to the creative and meaningful use of ideas and words, you've made it to abstraction. I know now because I've given about 800 childhood autism rating scales, about 800 FEASs. If you get to this level on the functional emotional assessment scale, you no longer have autism according to the childhood autism rating scale. So for my money, autism lives in that gap. And that's the gap in which we try to work. Okay, so now I'm going to show you some examples of the work, which is your reward for having sat through all of this chatting. My technology guy, we just hired a new technology guy, told me I'm a total clod because I don't embed them in my PowerPoint, but it crashes my computer, so I don't do it. All right, so let me just show you. Let me just show you why abstraction is the problem. Here's a 10-year-old who can't answer a why question. Merci. Okay, hold on a second. I brought my own speakers, so hold on. I know what I'm doing. I'm a professional. And I have a doctorate. Okay.
And also the sun is a hot star.
Can I see the picture of the sun? Oh, nice. Can I ask? Hey, so that kid's pretty good, right? He's got PDD-NOS as his diagnosis, and he drew a picture of the solar system. That's pretty good. His fine motor is very, very nice.
So
Okay. This sometimes happens in the interaction between this machine and this machine. It's a software problem. Try again.
this is a math problem of my solar system of our math problems. First, we are doing a lot of planets, and also the sun is a hot star.
Can I see the picture of the sun?
And
Oh, nice.
this is
Can I ask?
our soul.
All right, enough of this. Oh, I know what's going on. Okay, so then I ask him, I ask him, why does the sun look different than the other stars?
The same thing as stars more than planets.
Okay, is that the answer to that question?
No.
Okay. What is the answer to the question? I don't want to put you on the spot. It's because it's closer. Okay, go ahead. That's what I'm asking you. How come the sun looks different from other stars?
Because the sun gives us light and the sun is different from other stars.
So how come the sun can give us light, but other stars can't give us light?
Because stars is a light for us to see in a telescope, but at nighttime. And when the moon's light before it's dark, it comes out around. And also when the sun is facing the moon, that's when the question comes in, and that's so bright you can't see a thing.
Now, what a sweet kid, right? What's he doing? He's saying everything he's heard in class. The answer to the question must be somewhere in something the teacher told me. So I will repeat from my memory every single thing that she said. But the truth is, she never asked it. She never answered that question. So he doesn't know. He's operating entirely out of his memory. This is a disorder of relating and communicating, not a disorder of memory. This kid remembers everything perfectly. If you're going to aim your intervention at memory, why? He already has a good memory. Let's aim it at him becoming more abstract. So I continue to harass him and push him, perhaps beyond anybody's suffering. And he's sitting there and very kindly, within our relationship, not punching me. You only see at night. How come?
Because that's our sun in the solar system, and that's why I am telling you this. And now, please let me finish this, and no one's talking.
Okay, but I just don't understand, but maybe we'll come back to that later. Okay, tell me more about your plan. You want a sweet little soul, right? And he didn't punch me. He didn't punch me, but he was punching other kids in the class. And why? Because in 3rd grade, you have to be more abstract. 2nd grade, if you go to 2nd half grade on your memory, you can't go to 3rd grade on your memory. And a pretty well-known developmental pediatrician in New York said to me, "Oh my God, Gil, I never understood why all the referrals come to me at the beginning of 3rd grade. That's because the curriculum suddenly becomes very abstract in 3rd grade. You have to be able to tell what we call some kind of things. And so if you're not abstract, you're going to have problems." Let me show you someone working in the DIR model at a very, at one of the earlier developmental levels.
Oh, you got it. Oh no! You got it. You got it.
Okay, so essentially what this kid likes to do is grab your name tag and flap it in front of his face, right? That's not so surprising. So Alex lets him grab his name tag, but Alex is not going to let this be a solitary act. So trick number 1, if it's a developmental disorder, get your face in front of the kid. You shouldn't be working from behind kids. Trick number 2, you want a kid to look at your face, put something in your mouth. Always works, it's so great. Whatever they like. You got to be kind of immune to germs after a while. I guess I could ask Glenn. Glenn actually probably was sick about 18 times the first few weeks that he worked at Rebecca's school, but now he's immune to almost every disease known. Okay, so look at the difference in this kid's face in just the 3 seconds that they were connected, right? This is all that matters, truthfully. There's a lot of rules around what you can and cannot do, trust me, but this is what matters. It's a deep and abiding connection that you have to be in touch with yourself enough that you can connect to somebody else. And it doesn't matter what you're going to do for therapy. It doesn't matter what level of people you're going to work with. If you're not sincerely in the room and you're not actually connected with the people, it doesn't matter what you do. Truth is, you can have anything in your head as your heuristic in how you're working. You could be a cognitive person, you could be, you know, a psychoanalytic person. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what you're using as your model, but you have to be present, and that's what makes a difference. Now he's moving slowly because this kid's processing is so slow. So if you were this kid and I came over to you like this, you might have seen me over here and never saw me again until I was already on top of you, right? Dads like to do this with kids. Boop, 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 and poke them real fast, right? But the kid may never even see your hand coming if they're having trouble processing. So low and slow with a lot of affect, and I'm coming to get you, right? And that's what Alex is doing. He's respecting this kid's processing time.
Got it. Yeah.
he's going to raise the bar a little bit and make it harder, right? So that you love this. This is what you want to play with. I have no issue with that. Let's play with it. But it's going to be a little harder this time.
Thank you.
Okay, too hard. So lower the demand immediately. Right? Kids have to win 70% of the time that they win.
I know. Oh no! Oh no!
You know what I love about Alex is he keeps saying to me, "You got it. You're so strong." Imagine how that little kid feels. This big adult, fully neurologically sound guy is saying, "You're too strong for me." That's really powerful. Right? This kid doesn't feel powerful in a lot of other places. So you'll notice that what happens neurologically to someone who you get connected to, all of your systems begin firing together. So this kid who had tremendous trouble holding his body upright is able to get himself upright in the course of about 4 minutes. And Alex works with him some more and some more and some more. I would love to show you this lovely giggly interaction. I want to just show you the end of it. Protecting himself wisely.
God, you're too strong for me. I'm gonna go back and get it. I'm gonna go back and get it. I'm gonna go back and get it.
And so she tells Alex the class is over.
It's time to go. It's time to go. It's time to go. Let's go, buddy. Let's go. Let's go. I'm gonna get him one more last time. Oh no! I got it. It's mine. It's mine. It's mine. It's mine. Not yours.
Sweet, right? If you show this to MDs, you know what they say? You touch kids. And that's the great luxury of being a private school, right? No public school, most public schools could not do that, certainly not in the city of New York. Blow raspberries on a kid's stomach. I want to show you a kid who came to the school very quickly. Just what his initial intake looked like. It's loud because we're on Route 4 with giant air cleaners that look like Bobby the Robot blowing out of the night. We had no water and no air conditioning until the summer. We were recruiting into the school. Mom wants to play with this kid. And so he takes a group of dinosaurs and does what you think the kid is autistic to do. He lines them up and sorts them by color. That's what the intake was like. He went on and he went back to a neurotypical school, a school for kids who are, with no support. So let me show you what he looked like right before he left us. This is us working with him on a visual spatial.
You know how to beatbox like boom?
This is the same thing.
You could do that while saying switch. Yeah, just like that.
And so where is the switch gonna come in?
Well, you'll beatbox like a few seconds, and then
Okay.
after 5 seconds you'll go switch.
Can you show me?
Alright.
Well, no, I mean, can you show me with the beatboxing, how I fit the switching into the beatboxing?
1, 2, 3. Switch.
Okay.
Switch. And then
Okay.
you go break it down after the
Okay.
second switch.
All right. And how do I, wait, how's break it down gonna work into the rhythm?
Well, after 5 seconds of saying, switching it,
Yeah.
wait, 5 seconds of beatbox, switch, 5 seconds of another switch, then it'll be, and right after you say switch for the second time, you'll be break it down now.
Okay, but I'm just worried about, I'm just wondering about the rhythm. how I fit it into the rhythm. So can you show me how to fit, can you show me the whole thing, the whole, with the 2 switches and then the break it down?
Switch. Switch. I'm breaking down now.
Okay. And then, okay. And then go back.
And then go back and keep doing that.
Okay.
I'll do my sequences and I'll...
Great, excellent. Okay.
You ready?
Yes. All right. So, do you want to give me a 4 count?
All right. 1, 2.
Well, would you?
And the therapist is obviously
Should I
trying to
start
push him and push him and
and
push
then
him.
you start dancing, or do you want to start as right when? Do you want to start dancing right when I start?
I'll start dancing as right when you start,
Okay.
and then you go into dancing.
Okay. So do you want to? So.
As soon as you do this,
Okay. All right.
let me know if you're ready.
I'm ready. And can you give me the count?
1, 2, 3, and 4.
Switch. Switch. Break it down now.
Yeah, that's occupational therapy. And that kid went on to a school for neurotypical kids. I have so much beautiful video to show you, but I think I want to show you spectacular videos, so not just beautiful video. We do music therapy, Nordhoff-Robbins music therapy, created by Paul Nordhoff and Clive Robbins, who I showed you before. Taught at NYU, is one of the major centers in this country. It is just like the IR, only with music. So this is a little girl who we had no success with. Her name is Kate. No success with 4 years. I did lousy work with her. Every other language-based therapist we ever had did lousy work with her. Even previous music therapists did lousy work with her. We hired a guy who was capable of playing, was a classically trained Nordhoff-Robbins music therapist. All our other people are Nordhoff-Robbins music therapists too. But this was his first encounter with her. All right, so she doesn't have a piano at home. She's never taken piano lessons. Do you know what she just played? Okay, Kenji knew. This is a little girl who sat with her head in a corner, hiding her face for 4 years, and we could not get her out. And she played the bass line from Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, and our music therapist recognized it and played it. And she was like, "Oh my God, someone speaks my language!" So that was the first time he realized, oh my God, this little girl has classical music in her head. So what else can she do? Let's see what else she was doing. She doesn't have a piano at home, and she's never taken a lesson. She heard the music, saw the piano, and figured out where her fingers should go. This is the first time she ever did this. And so Kenji had to figure out what she So she's a genius, right? So she has this amazing musical talent. If she met Oliver Sacks, she would leave still having autism and still not having been in a relationship, because he would put her on display and she would be a brilliant savant. And she would play lots of really brilliant things. And so we ran that risk, right? We could just fall into that. So all of our supervision, we run a supervision group around this, has been around, okay, so how do you take, basically she's scripting, but she's scripting music. How do you take that and turn that into an actual communication? So Kenji's